Now, in introducing Mary Small, Mrs. Sullivan and I went up the other night to the Versailles restaurant, where she is headlining. We were struck by, Mary Small was one of our Paul Bruners out in the audience, and Paul Brun probably remembers her when she played down in Miami, Florida, when she was about so big. She was a child prodigy, and she started growing up. And instead of losing what she had as a child star, she's developed to a point where today she's one of the great singers of our town. So here is Mary Small again. Let's have a very nice song.
Hollywood. Here's a wire from Frank Sinatra. He says, "Dear Mary, the coffee song is really percolating out here on the West Coast. I'm glad I made a record of it. It looks like a real hit." Signed, Frank Sinatra. By popular demand, Mary Small sings, "They've got an awful lot of coffee in Brazil."
Way down among Brazilians, coffee beans grow by the billions, so they've got to find those extra cups to fill. They've got an awful lot of coffee in Brazil. You can't get cherry soda, 'cause they've got to sell their quota, and the way things are, I guess they never will. They've got a zillion tons of coffee in Brazil.
The recklessness of the Roaring '20s is often romanticized as a gilded age, one that abruptly ended with a stock market crash and ushered in the Great Depression. But it was also that slip into economic calamity that became the catalyst in the evolution of our national character, inspiring a generation to rebuild both its economy and its common bonds. And not all of the heavy lifting was done by the adults. From early on, Harriet Small had her work cut out for her. Born to Russian immigrants on Baltimore's Reservoir Hill, she was dragged to auditions as a toddler and became a steady breadwinner for the family before she had learned to read. She was interviewed by David Siegel for his book, Remembering Radio.
Your home initially was Baltimore.
That's right. Baltimore, Maryland.
And how did you get started on the radio? How did you make your first radio appearance? Or where
I
was
was
that?
about 6 years old, and I remember in Baltimore we were listening to Uncle Jack's Kitty Hour. My father sang to me 18 hours a day. And so singing was what I did most of all. He couldn't see his way into the profession, and so as so many parents will, they do it through their children. I remember a song, he said, "You don't need friends, I'm your pal."
At the age of 9, she competed on the Gus Edwards Show on WBAL. Gus was a songwriter, vaudevillian, and star maker. He discovered Groucho Marx, Walter Winchell, and Eddie Cantor.
When I went to New York with Gus Edwards, they turned me down. They said, "She's a freak. She's got a woman's voice, and she's just a kid with little white socks, a little chubby face, and a Buster Brown haircut."
Those three ex-sisters.
In the winter of 1932, she persuaded her father to spend what few dollars they had to see the three ex-sisters at the Hippodrome Theater.
When you tune in on the radio and you hear a lot of whistles blow, woo, woo, that's Rex with his sound effects. When you hear him howl, go moo, 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 and the roosters cock-a-doodle-doo, that's Rex with his sound effects.
After the finale, Harriet rushed out onto Utah Street to greet the trio, but instead of just asking for an autograph, asked for an audition too. The group's manager, Ed Wolf, would eventually sign and introduce her to Rudy Vallee.
He had the power. Rudy Vallee was like, who was big today? Oprah Winfrey was big today? I don't know. He was the Ed Sullivan of his day, and the major pose of his day. And Mary was very much connected and very much a part of that era.
He had a lot of people who came, and he would know whether they were good or whether they weren't. And he knew right away. He was the first one to have a radio show like that for 10 years. He would let them do what they wanted to do, which I think is wonderful, because he didn't make them do anything. It was what they wanted to do, which is important.
Her first appearance on the Fleischman Yeast Hour came in October of 1933, but Rudy insisted on making one slight change right before they went live.
He once had a girlfriend, or for some reason he didn't like the name Harriet too much, or whatever it was. They changed it to Mary. I think that he was singing Mary's a grand old name, and he said, "Why do you use the name Mary?" Well, there's something casual and fleeting about that remark, but she took it on.
Hi-ho, everybody. This is Rudy Vallee and Company. Mary Small, aged 11 years, of Baltimore, Maryland. Ordinarily, this program does not go in for child performers. Cute kiddies give us a small pain in the collective neck. But she has a genuine talent. The fact that she is 11 years of age is interesting, but not very important.
Out of the river comes a melancholy wail. All the trees are a shiver, even the moon turns pale.
Her performance of Louisville Lady made headlines, in part because while the NBC audience loved her, most didn't buy the network's claims about her age.
Well, let me see. Here I was about 12 years old, 15 minutes, 5 nights a week, at 7:15, getting proposals of marriage until they began to announce my age. But they still kept on.
By January, she earned a 15-minute spot on NBC affiliate WEAF in New York. The family began making arrangements to move to Manhattan.
That's how it happened. And then I got my own radio show, which I just mentioned, 15 minutes, 5 nights a week, which Frank Sinatra followed. And we knew each other pretty well, me with my little white socks, he with his long pants. But he had just left the Tommy Dorsey band. I came in at 11 o'clock with Walter Gross's orchestra, 17-piece live band. I rehearsed during the afternoon, and there was a commercial break of about 60 seconds, and Frank Sinatra came in at 11:15, and he was billed as the voice that is thrilling millions.
Her show sponsor was B.T. Babbitt, an industrial giant well known for keeping a stable of stars on the payroll and developing talent. They gave her the freedom to pick some of her own music, which ranged from Pagliacci's Vesti la Juba to the Mexican folk classic La Cucaracha.
My Little Miss Babo show I was dressed in the most horrific, awful. If you've ever seen the can of Babo, I looked like the can. A green satin outfit, a direct copy of the costume on the can.
My aunt, who was very close with his neighbor, was offered tickets to give to my mother and me to take me to see Mary. And I was about 6 years old or 7 years old. And I remember the show. The sponsor was Babo, and it was using the lyrics of a song called Glowworm. And when Mary studied with me, and we happened to come across the Glowworm song, and I said, "You play the accompaniment, I'll sing it." And I sang, "Glow, little glowworm, glimmer, glimmer, Babo makes you," and she immediately said, "How do you know that?"
Mary Small was on my TV show and my radio show through the years, at least 80 times, as she would call me. We were very, very close. I mean, I can't tell you how close we were. And
that's something I never told Mary Small. I remember I saw a comic book once called True Comics Magazine. True Adventures of a 12-year-old girl with her own radio show. Do you have anybody ever tell you about that?
Yes, I have the copy.
Yeah.
And my children get hysterical. They bring it out whenever they want to tell me what for.
Live performances were often compared to those of her contemporary, Baby Rose Marie.
You remember Baby Rose Marie?
Hey, hey, no doubt you've heard about the sweetest man in Dixieland. All say he's hot, he's got just what it takes to make a ladies' man.
Our parents were not my mother so much, but my father and Rosemarie's father kept us apart. And we were kids about the same age, and we wanted to be together. She was on the Taste East is tempting with da bum bum bum. She had Taste East, and I had Babo. She went on at 12:15, and finally one day we went up to where we rehearsed separately with different pianists to Shapiro Bernstein. They had, lots of the biggest hits. And so we rehearsed, and one day we snuck into a room and started to play the piano and talk, and we enjoyed each other so much. But she was the greatest singer. I envied her. I felt she had the edge. So you see, a child, particularly a girl in those days, in the theater, there are two things to look at. You're suppressed because you cannot play with kids your own age, which is a natural desire. And you are watched over so carefully that you feel like you're doing something wrong, and you really want to go roller skating.
Look at that cute kid. That's, what's her name?
Mary Small. Don't you know her? Even I know her.
Thanks for the information.
Time to stop your scheming. Time your day was through. Can't you hear the bugle softly play?
In the spring of 1934, she accepted an offer to sing at the 3,660-seat Paramount Theater on 43rd and Broadway. She was just 12 years old.
You know, there were 4 movies a day, let's say at the Paramount, which I played. And between the movies and the news, the Fox News was so old-fashioned, as I recall. They had vaudeville, and I would headline radio's Little Child Singing Star, and I'd get out there and belt songs like I'm heading for the last roundup, which nobody knows now.
Attendance at the Paramount hit capacity in her first week and quickly came to the attention of Adolf Zucker, the founder of Paramount Pictures. After seeing her act, he wired the Fleischer brothers and instructed them to cast her in one of their screen songs. That summer, she headed to Hollywood to sing in the short film, Love Thy Neighbor.
Love, you should love your neighbor, offer to share his burden. Tell him to say the word and you will see him through.
Paramount's Love Thy Neighbor formally introduced Mary to the world as the little girl with the big voice. But she wouldn't be a little girl for very much longer. She returned to New York, the city that had adopted her, and began growing up fast.
Thanks an awful lot, friends. You know, I really love this great metropolis of ours, New York City. I'm kind of crazy about the people who live in it.
When I watched her perform, I said she represents a certain kind of quality of what New York City has to offer, and she was a very good singer. Her ear was wonderful, her voice was wonderful, and the audiences loved her. So I got the feeling that she epitomized what maybe the business was when she was at her best.
She was very witty, fiercely sadistic, fiercely sarcastic, fiercely bright. I would say brilliant. She spoke fast, she spoke loud. I walked with her in the streets many times from my office to the studio and back, and she had that cadence.
When she turned 16, she hung up her Babbo bonnet and was rebranded as Junior Miss, sponsored by Clark Candy Bars.
Time to stop your hesitating, baby. Try to button my time while you're hiding. Come on out.
The Mary Small Show in one incarnation or another would run for over a decade across all major networks. Through it all, she continued to capitalize on her trademark, the little girl with the big voice. She owned a chain of flower stores and became a director of the Baltimore Bank and Trust. On and off the air, she shared stage time with Roy Rogers, Elsa Maxwell, Dean Martin, Jerry Lewis, and Jackie Gleason, and headlined with the biggest orchestras of the day, including Ben Burney, Tommy Dorsey, Sonny Schuyler, and Ray Bloch.
You worked with Ray Bloch as well, huh?
Yeah, he was CBS. He was the big wheel there, and of course...
What do you recall about Ray Bloch?
Well, about the best band leader I ever worked with. In complete command. Consummate musician.
Over the next decade, she was featured on NBC, ABC, CBS, and the Mutual Network, and booked shows at venues as diverse as Madison Square Garden, the Sands in Vegas, and the Palace Theater in Chicago.
Well, what do you know? He smiled at me in my dreams last night. My dreams are getting better all the time. And what do you know? He looked at me in a different light. My dreams are getting better all the time.
In 1940, it was reported that Dinah Shore had replaced her, but in fact, it was Mary that had decided to take a year off for herself to study creative writing at Columbia University. She had already been a published author in 1937 in a prestigious literary journal, and again some years later in Women's Home Companion. The break from radio and the stage wouldn't last long. During her first Christmas break from school, she headed down to Tin Pan Alley to shop for material for a new show.
When you walk down 48th Street, you would hear trumpets screaming from one building and trombones from another, and pianos and people singing, and it got the name Tin Pan Alley at that time. That's where the name came from. You hear all sorts of sounds.
In New York's Harlem, they're strutting and jiving to straighten up and fly right.
Straighten up and fly right. Straighten up and fly right.
It was there she met the man who would change her career trajectory, Vic Mizzy, a talented composer who worked with lyricists like Irving Taylor and Man Curtis. The courtship was swift. He took her to the Tunnel of Love at Coney Island on their first date. They would spend most evenings alone, listening to classical records. He was 6 years her senior, the first man she had ever been close to.
I was married. I got married to one of the big singers of that era called Mary Small. I remember seeing her when she was 9 years old. I couldn't believe she was 9 years old. She had a very low register for a young kid. Anyway, we were married, and Irving was married, but she was on the air all the time. She was a very big radio singer. They call her Mary Small, the little girl with the big voice, because she had a low register. Always had her own shows.
But while they were falling in love, Europe and half of the world was falling apart. On December 7th, 1941, the conflict escalated.
Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy.
As the United States prepared for combat, it became clear that President Roosevelt was using the power of radio to equip the nation militarily and to influence public opinion. Network programming was built around the war effort. Mary frequently appeared on shows with actors like Jimmy Stewart to support the Treasury.
Guest stars for this program, one of America's most popular radio singers, Mary Small, and Screenland's Jimmy Stewart.
Excuse me, Mr. Elliott, but,
Mr. Elliott's busy, buddy. You can't talk to him now. Sorry. All right, Win. Introduce me to Jimmy Stewart.
This guy you've been showing away is Jimmy Stewart. Yes, sir!
Vic enlisted after Pearl Harbor. The Navy recognized his talents and assigned him as an organist for the Chaplain's Corps in Rhode Island, close enough to New York to visit Mary. As the war dragged on, the couple became worried that Vic would be shipped off. They married. While Vic did his part, Mary teamed up with the 3 X Sisters for a USO tour.
Eddie Cantor used to say, when you go to a grocery store, you got to pay for the milk. You go to a meat market, you got to pay for the liver. But entertainers, they don't get paid. They get asked all the time to do benefits. And every one of them went into anybody who called Eddie Cantor or Mary Small for a benefit, they were there.
Hello. My name is Mary Small. Usually I'm behind the mic with a little offering called the Mary Small Show. But right now I'm here at the request of 150 guys in the 898th Ordnance Company somewhere in Upper Assam, India. They've asked me, and by request, to beat out the #1 song on the Lido Road Hit Parade. It's called Cream Lights, and it was written by 2 of the boys in that outfit, Sergeant Al Spatila and Corporal Joe Osicki. So here it is, gang, with all the trimmings for Deacon and Spike and the rest of the 898th.
At the March of Dimes celebration of Roosevelt's 60th birthday, Mary sang a tune entitled Thank You, Mr. President, broadcast live from the Waldorf Astoria.
We have one brief call to make before we start from here for a swing around the country to see how our many other birthday parties are going. And that call means just a short jaunt across town, where a bright little radio star is patiently waiting. Yes, waiting there is Mary Small, who recently wrote her own song for the infantile paralysis campaign this year.
There's a man who lives in the White House, the lighthouse of the earth. He's a great humanitarian. Mere words couldn't measure his worth.
In 1943, she debuted at the Broadhurst Theater on West 44th Street in the Fats Waller musical, Early to Bed. Despite positive reviews, it would be years before a return to musical theater. As the war drew to a close, Vic persuaded Mary it was time to settle down. They had their first child, a daughter they named Patty, in 1945. Yet by the late 40s, she had grown restless and returned to performing full-time.
Mary had a lot of big shows going. She was on all the time. And her conductor was a guy called Ray Block. And Ray Block was a fine gentleman. He's also the conductor for the Ed Sullivan Show. And Mary had good arrangers. I was her arranger, but I was in the Navy, and I just couldn't do it. Every once in a while, I would send her one by mail or something. But she had guys like Gus Levine, Van Cleve, George Lemons, Walter Gross. They were the top people.
And now our guests here, among our guests, is a youngster I first met when he was in the Coast Guard during World War II. He had a wonderful war record. And in addition to that, and on his own time, he was composing songs and organizing shows for the Coast Guardsmen. So I'd like you to meet Vic Mizzy, ex-Coast Guard. Vic is at the piano here. Now then, sitting with him there, or at least she was until he moved to his favorite piano, is his wife, Mary Small, who, of course, in fact, all morning long they were playing your records. That Brad Phillips on WINS. So here is Mary Small going to sing some of the songs that Vic wrote. Would you sing, John?
In 1949, she began appearing on some of the country's first nationally televised variety programs, including Ed Sullivan's Toast of the Town and Milton Berle's Texaco Star Theater.
Gentlemen, introducing an incomparable singer, one of the greatest delineators of songs that we have today. First time I ever met her, she's a Baltimore girl. She was just a little child. She has grown up to be a very, very talented Broadway star. It's a pleasure to present to you the great singing personality of Mary Small, ladies and gentlemen.
The husband grabs his hat and hurries off to the job. The kiddies grab their books and then he run with a sob. The women grab their wash and into the tub. They rub-a-dub-dub, oh, how they scrub. Yeah!
While most of Mary's television performances from that era have been lost, the Sullivan and Berle shows that survive remain the most significant in her life and career. She had grown up on a vaudeville stage with Milton Berle and knew Ed Sullivan since she was a kid. Their approval meant everything to her.
I would take the wealth of Wall Street for a road where nature trods, and I calculate I'm worth my
The
weight.
exposure, especially on Sullivan, put Mary back on the map, and she began recording singles, starting with King Records in 1951. Later, she signed with Epic and finally Capitol.
Everybody but me. Everybody's got love they're sharing. Everybody but me.
Rehearsals and studio sessions would eventually take a toll on her family. She began to feel that her husband had grown jealous. She accused him of insisting that she only sing his songs, a demand that put a strain on their already competitive relationship.
And the reason they made records, and I didn't many successful ones, was because at the age of 16, I got married to a songwriter. And I insisted, being a dutiful baby wife, maybe not baby wife. I wanted to be kind. I didn't want him to be Mr. Small. And so I sang all of his songs. Didn't quite make it. Without a record, even then, when it was just beginning, you didn't have a career.
She accepted an invitation from the London Palladium in 1953 for a set of engagements.
I gave up my work after I went to London because I had 2 children. And London was the beginning of big things for me. It would have been just great. But when you have 2 kids and you bring them with you, you can't get a nanny who will care. And I was so concerned about the kids. I was quite young. And I hate to say this, but my former husband wasn't exactly in the mood to be a nanny while I was singing on the stage. You see, he played the piano for me. So there was just nobody to connect the family and the profession.
Upon her return to New York, she took an offer to open for Sammy Davis Jr. at the Copacabana. Showing signs of frustration, she dropped out of the show after only a few weeks.
You can have him. I don't want him.
The next 5 years encompassed a marriage of convenience. In those days, even in New York, a breakup wasn't always easy. In 1959, she fled to Mexico for a divorce.
Let me offer my congratulations. You're marrying a wonderful guy. If you think I'm hurt, it's your imagination. Take another look, you'll see my eyes are dry. And I hocked my ring, and here's what I want to know.
Good Lord, I worked a lot. Why don't I have $1 million today?
Well, you probably invested it in the wrong stock.
Well, I didn't have any of it. They took it away. I was a child anyway. My ex-husband wrote the music recently for the Addams Family. And he's no longer Mr. Small. Now, if people don't know me, I say, well, I was once married to Vic Mizzy, who wrote the Addams Family. I think that's a bit of irony that would make a good novel.
The divorce was finalized in 1962, a full 2 years before Vic would move to Los Angeles and compose the theme to the Addams Family, a record he once joked was his ticket to Bel Air. Mary remained in New York. Vic died in 2009 at the age of 93. Despite children together, the pair had hardly spoken in 30 years.
I know she was very, very cutting in her remarks about Vic Mizzy. She really, I don't know if she was serious, but she always made fun of him. She said it was a waste of life, waste of time. She was really severe on recalling Vic Mizzy, but I'm sure they were happy in their heyday. You can't knock what was, but fame is fleeting and time goes fast, and it's for what it was a great era, great era.
Life has a book of rules that all of us must live by. It applies to wise men as well as fools. Though we scrape for a living, or we live high.
After scraping together her royalties from the Capitol years and some of the assets left over from the divorce, Mary set up an agency and record label she called Vi Talent in the early 60s. When it folded only after a few years, leaving Mary penniless, it was a disappointment, but she carried on, proud of the work. She had lived through the Depression and the war. At the end of the day, she lived to sing, and the bills could wait.
I remember that when she started it, she had talked to me about, I'm going to start my own little label, and it will be called By Talent. And she gave me some of the recordings that she did, one with Bucky Pizzarelli called The Touch, and several others. She did some very good work, and she worked with some very good professionals, and their quality was excellent.
When you love to sing and you're born with it, I teach singing now, and I have some people who were born with it, some who were born a little bit with it, and so you go according to how much they have.
At 52 years old, with her recording career long behind her, she decided to return to the theater, but surprised many by choosing roles in controversial plays such as Sextet, and off-Broadway productions including Julianne Barry's Lenny, in which she portrayed the mother of the late comic, Lenny Bruce.
Did you know him, Miss Small?
No, I didn't know him. And to be terribly honest, I never had the privilege of observing him. Never having seen Lenny is one thing, but I know I missed the actual physical Lenny Bruce.
The press keeps hammering away for
Do
one
you think the language distresses anybody anymore?
Distresses me.
The language in the play?
Yeah.
When he was starving, and he could have worked, had he not used the so-called obscene language, he still used it, and
But
he
I
continued
wonder
to
if
starve.
I wonder at that time if he was able.
I see.
She reprised the role of Stella Deans in the first touring production of Sondheim's Follies, and Mama in the '82 revival of Neil Simon's Little Me.
Boy, oh boy, do we need Little Me! Raise Rex Reed in the Daily News.
The next 10 years of her life were spent in cabarets and supper clubs. By the time the 90s arrived, Mary had spent well over half a century performing on stage, radio, film, and television, and finally called it a day. She settled down in an apartment near Lincoln Center. Without a source of income aside from a Social Security check, it remained difficult paying the rent, but luckily Mary found one last calling, in teaching.
Mary Small's ad, I think, was one of the worst ads I've ever seen. It was so bad, I remember it. It was voice lessons. If you sing well, don't come to me, you don't need me. If you sing poorly, I don't want you as a student. But if you're somewhere in between, I'll be glad to give you lessons. I don't know how successful it was, but that was her ad.
I'm not sure Mary knew how to advertise correctly. I mean, I don't remember that ad particularly, but it doesn't sound like you want to run to see her. But I think she tried to get them to listen better and to sing better, using their voice better, breathe better. All of the technical things that she learned, and she did have a good technique.
I'm very proud to present one of my best friends in New York. She's very well known in nightclub, entertainment business, on Broadway, on musicals. She's been for her whole life over there. So her name is Mary Small.
God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her through the night with a light from above. I just want to say that's the first time that I had tears in my eyes and I wasn't singing about a broken heart.
Oh, that I think
you know, usually torch songs break me up, you know, and
While her last years were spent living from paycheck to paycheck, the moments and memories that she shared with her students were priceless. She had lived a remarkable life, complete with regrets and contradictions, yet ultimately one of uncompromised devotion to her craft and love for music. It was surprising that in February of 2007, when she was moved to a hospital in Harlem, almost nobody knew she was ill. She had spent her last penny on healthcare and was too proud to let anybody see her diminished. Most of her friends and contemporaries were 20 to 30 years her senior and had long departed. Her family had grown apart, and her career, like so many performers of the Golden Age, had faded. There was nobody left to write her obituary.
When I checked with the probate court, I found out that all of her possessions had been discarded in the city dump, and she had been left with absolutely no recognition of her accomplishments.
I know she was independent. It's not that she wanted to beg for money, but I would have thought that people would care enough about her. I certainly, if I had been in New York, I would not have let that happen, to be honest. I would have found a way to stay in touch with her somehow. She had a good soul, Mary, and she was vulnerable. And I think she got hurt easily and didn't understand why people would do certain things to her in the business as well. So the fact that she died alone, I think it's very sad.
When you're prepared and you love it, and I didn't love the life, but I loved the singing. I loved the applause.
From this confusion, I dreamed of a grand illusion. It's my symphony in
Well, I guess that does it. It's been nice. And if you want more enjoyment, take my advice. Tune in next week.
At the same time and station.
For the hits of the day from all over the nation.
Thanks, Harry Babbitt, and thanks, Mary Small. Thanks, Ray Block, for the music and all. And if you want your hair naturally lovely and nice, there's no better shampoo at any price than Conti.
He's right.
He's right.
Good night.
Good
night.
I want a slightly older, head on my shoulder man. I mean, I've been around some, feet on the ground some man. I know enough of those thrillers, those lady killers, to know mine's a sensible plan. I want a slightly older, head on my shoulder man. I wanna likes my cooking, thinks I'm good looking man. I mean, for me only, without me